May 20th, 1951. American F-86 Sabre jets ripped through enemy airspace above Sinuiju, North Korea at over 500 miles per hour. Their objective is simple: lure enemy MiGs into a fight and kill as many as possible. These pilots are pioneers of a new age. Air combat is now driven by the jet engine.
These guys went into a very unknown environment. They went into a very tough war. This wasn't World War II. They took airplanes that were flying twice the speed of any fighter combat before, and they showed us how it was done.
James Jabara flies element lead in a flight of 6. The 27-year-old captain is one of the best. A Mustang pilot during World War II, he's become a master of jet versus jet combat. With 4 MiG-15 kills to his credit, he's one away from becoming the first American ace of the jet age.
Jabara is so close. I mean, he's got 4 MiG kills. The Air Force desperately wants an ace, and he's the guy that can do it.
After only minutes in enemy territory, he'll get his chance. 50 gleaming MiG-15s scream across the Yalu River to take on the Americans. Jabara punches his tanks to streamline his fighter for combat, but something goes wrong.
He loses only one of his tanks, gets a huge asymmetric rocking motion on the aircraft, probably bangs his head off the canopy, has a difficult time controlling the airplane.
The pins securing the tanks to the wing have frozen, a common problem in the frigid skies of North Korea. Standing orders dictate that he must return to base.
He puts both hands on the stick, steadies it, and gets the aircraft back under control, and then in a very short amount of time has to make that critical combat decision. Can I still fight with this airplane? Now, his judgment is weighed with his aggressiveness, and his aggressiveness wins out.
Jabara and the rest of the Americans pull a right break into the oncoming enemy. Approaching head-on, the fighters close at over 1,600 feet per second. At this speed, it's next to impossible to get an accurate shot. The MiGs thunder past. Jabara jerks the stick hard left to pursue. The hung wing tank turns his F-86 into a bucking Bronco.
He's probably pulling 30, 40, 50 pounds of stick force right there and trying to control his jet as he's pulling lead out in front.
Jabara's wingman, Salvatore Kemp, calls out 3 more MiGs diving fast from behind. The MiGs are here. They've gained a 100-mile-per-hour speed advantage in the dive. Jabara and Kemp are here, with only a split second to counter them. The MiGs hurtle in. Jabara pulls up and to the right. He's using the MiGs' diving speed against them, forcing an overshoot.
Jabara's brake turn up to the right forces 2 MiGs to go right by and continue to go. One MiG, for one reason or another, decides to peel off to the left, exposing his belly to Jabara.
Jabara pounces. He snaps his plane to the left and locks onto tail end Charlie.
Not only is that the sign of a good fighter pilot, but it's a sign of a good fighter pilot in the new jet age. Things happen extremely fast, and those that are able to react almost before it happens are able to take advantage.
The bandit stays in a diving left turn. Jabara pulls the stick in tight to stay in trail. At this altitude, the F-86 and MiG-15 are evenly matched in a turning fight. But Jabara's got something his foe lacks: a G-suit. It's a World War II invention that came into its own as an essential tool of dogfighting in the jet age. The G-suit constricts around Jabara's legs and abdomen, keeping blood from pooling in his extremities. Jabara is able to pull tighter than the MiG pilot without blacking out. He closes the gap. His coveted 5th kill is now in perfect position, dead center in his gun sight. Jabara opens fire. 50 caliber rounds impact the MiG. The pilot ejects. Seconds later, the empty fuselage explodes.
This is what he's been working for. This is why he's been in Korea. So he has got to be elated at this point.
It's a confirmed kill. America has its first jet ace. September 23rd, 1970. In the midst of a wild melee, famed German ace Voss holds his own against no less than 6 top British aces. Voss savors the combat, superbly demonstrating the lethal effectiveness of his prototype Fokker triplane.
His stick and throttle ability, his ability to fly in a disciplined way in a fight, his ability to stay not calm, but to keep his wits about him in these very stressful situations. If he were flying with us today, he'd probably be one of the best.
British SE-5 pilot Richard Mayberry now zeroes in on Voss, diving on him from 6 o'clock. Voss breaks right to shake him off, but Mayberry is not thrown.
At this point in the battle, things get very complicated and very confused. An albatross joins the battle, which of course helps Voss considerably, at least numerically.
A German Albatross D3 has stumbled into the action, turning easily onto Mayberry's tail. Mayberry zoom climbs to shake the Albatross. A German pilot gives chase. But even worse, Voss latches on as well. Flying nearby, James McCudden and Arthur Rhys-Davids move in behind the Germans. And for a moment, the battle is transformed into a wild, twisting tail chase. The Germans are sandwiched between the British. The Albatross pitches up, zooms, then drops in behind McCudden and Rhys-Davids. The German yanks the stick back. The gut-churning loop puts him squarely behind the British.
Unfortunately for Rhys-Davids, the Albatross manages to unload his guns into his airplane.
But Rhys-Davids stays in the fight, the Albatross still on his tail. Now, at the head of the chase, Richard Mayberry will pitch up and loop back on the tail of the red-nosed Albatross. Mayberry yanks the stick back, throwing his SE-5 into a dizzying acrobatic maneuver. He fires from point-blank range. The wounded Albatross plummets. Voss is alone once again. He zooms, distancing himself from the slower climbing SE-5s. Voss looks down at the plane circling below. He could easily disengage and live to fight another day, but the enticement of the kill runs hot through his veins.
I think actually he got greedy, and he was looking at an opportunity to notch number 49 and number 50, and furthermore to close the gap on his friend and rival Manfred von Richthofen.
Voss dives back into the fray. He fires his Spandau machine guns into the nearest SE-5. Its engine pummeled. The British pilot dives out of the fight. The dogfight rages above no man's land. Voss handles the triplane superbly, pumping rounds into each of the attacking SE-5s. But it isn't enough.
The thing that's unfortunate for Voss is that he never really put enough planes out of commission to gain any sort of advantage. All the bullets he put into all those planes, he never drew a drop of blood from any of those opponents.
To the British, Voss seems invulnerable.
The triplane was still circling round in the midst of 6 SEs who were all firing at it as opportunity offered. And at one time I noted the triplane in the apex of a cone of tracer bullets from at least 5 machines simultaneously, and each machine had 2 guns.
The British are dumbstruck by the skill and tenacity of the German pilot in the Fokker triplane. But Werner Voss's luck is about to run out. Voss is here. British ace James McCudden is here. They'll streak in, head on. But Voss doesn't see another SE-5 coming in from the side. The SE-5 on the side watches the merge. Then opens fire. Rounds slam into the triplane's cockpit and fuselage. Voss stays aloft, but for the first time in the battle, he takes no evasive action. Then, Arthur Rhys-Davids dives on Voss from behind. He empties his Vickers machine guns into the triplane. Voss does little to avoid the deadly arc of bullets.
Given how much he straightened up and how the ferociousness of his maneuvering had abated, that he was wounded, and he was probably starting to have some difficulty maintaining consciousness.
Rhys-Davids fires another burst into the triplane, then pulls up. James McCudden is the only pilot to witness Voss's final moments.
When I next saw him, he was very low. I saw him go into a fairly steep dive, and so I continued to watch. And then saw the triplane hit the ground and disappear into 1,000 fragments. For it seemed to me that it literally went to powder.
After 10 minutes of ferocious combat, Werner Voss is dead at age 20. The German ace shot holes through every plane that attacked him, but incredibly, all returned to base. July 26, 1944, 8:45 a.m. 12 checker-tailed P-51 Mustangs knifed through the crisp alpine air near Graz, Austria. They're 7,000 feet above a formation of bombers. First Lieutenant Art Fiedler has the number 4 slot in a flight of 4.
We were long-range bomber escort. When we flew the 51, we could fly at least 650 miles.
Fiedler settles in for another uneventful 5-hour mission. Pilots call them milk runs. But just minutes into the mission, Fiedler spots something strange.
I look down to the left, and I see the most incredible formation I have ever seen. I see 8 airplanes flying line abreast, almost wingtip to wingtip. And there's not only one row, there are 8 rows of them. There are 64 airplanes. This is a fantastic formation.
Fiedler calls out the bogies.
somebody said, they're P-51s. And I said, how can they be P-51s? I never saw 51s fly in a formation like that.
Within seconds, Fiedler's worst fears are realized. The mystery planes are Focke-Wulf 190s, Germany's most advanced piston-engine fighter. Their 30mm cannons lay waste to the bombers.
At this particular juncture, I said, they're bogeys and they're hitting the bombers, I'm gone. I decide that if I shoot at the lead row of them, if I can hit any of them and have them pull up, that we can break the formation up and they'll stop shooting at the 17th.
But as he pulls up from his attack run, he's met with a horrifying sight.
There are 17s falling, pieces of them are falling. I see a B-17 roll over on its back, start down and spin. Second spin, the tail came off of it. There's at least 20 shoots. I've got to be careful where I'm going. I don't want to run into anybody.
Fiedler rolls away from the carnage, then spots a lone FW-190. Fiedler banks easily onto the German's tail and closes in for the kill. Suddenly, the 190 knifes hard right. Fiedler loses the bandit in the chase. The 190 pitches down into a steep dive. Fiedler noses over and maneuvers his P-51 behind the German. The two planes plunge earthward, 600 feet every second. Below the clouds, the rugged peaks of the Austrian Alps stretch out before them. The German noses up steeply into a climb. Fiedler claws for altitude.
I am astounded to see him coming straight down at me, and he's shooting at me. When he's coming down at me, I think, how the hell could he possibly go from straight up to straight down? And it seems like in just a couple of seconds. And that's exactly what was going through my mind. How is this possible?
Fiedler reverses and pursues his foe, closer and closer to the deck. They are hurtling earthward at over 450 miles per hour. During a wild chase to the deck, Art Fiedler has witnessed an FW-190 pilot performing impossibly difficult maneuvers. Now, Fiedler's locked on his tail in a high-speed pursuit through a mountain pass.
I'm about 400 yards, and I'm getting close enough to ready to start shooting at this guy. I remembered the advice that I had gotten from this World War I fighter pilot, that the easiest time to shoot an enemy airplane down is when he's trying to shoot one of yours down. So every time you're getting ready to shoot at an enemy airplane, be sure you check your tail.
Fiedler looks over his shoulder. Sure enough, another Focke-Wulf is diving on him. Fiedler comes to a stunning realization. His enemy wasn't superhuman. Fiedler's been fighting two FW-190s the whole time. Now the second 190 closes in for the kill. Fiedler will barrel roll, throwing off the German's aim while simultaneously slowing down enough to drop in behind the diving 190. Fiedler raises the Mustang's nose while pushing the stick over. The white-tipped Alps roll over his head as he drops into the Focke-Wulf's 6 o'clock. Payback time.
So I put my pipper out in front of him and started firing.
Fiedler hoses the German plane down with his 650 caliber Brownings. The FW-190 tumbles out of control.
and he crashed right there beside that barn.
Scratch one for Fiedler. But the first Focke-Wulf is somewhere up ahead.
So I keep going down the valley at full speed. I guess I travel about a minute and a half, and the canyon turns off to the left, and of course I follow the canyon, and we now come to a wide expanse. And as I start looking around, I look at that mound, and here comes an airplane right at me.
But then, a friendly voice crackles through the radio.
And it says, if that's a P-51 coming towards me, waggle your wings. Well, I waggle the wings, of course.
It's Bill Lowry, a squadron mate of Fiedler's. The two Mustangs form up and search the skies for targets. Suddenly, Lowry dives for the deck.
As I look down there, I see a trail of black smoke from as far to the right as I can see.
A wounded German Me-109 flying just above the ground. Lowry saddles up for an easy kill.
He presses the trigger, and I guess the guns fire about 3 rounds, and he's out of ammunition. So he pulls up here and he says, "He's all yours, you lucky SOB," but he didn't say SOB.
Fiedler slides in behind the German.
I'm pulling up kind of slow on this 109, who's still going balls to the wall and smoking black smoke.
This low to the ground, a single miscalculation is fatal.
Lowry's sitting up here and he's yelling, "Shoot, shoot, shoot!" And I'm saying, "Hold your horses, hold your horses."
Fiedler closes to 250 yards. The panicked German elects to bail out, 10 feet off the ground at nearly 400 miles per hour. His body impacts the ground and bounces. Fiedler witnesses the gruesome sight.
This is incredible. The second bounce looks like he's bouncing right over my wing. In the third bounce, he bounces right into the wreckage of his Me-109, which is smashed into the ground and is now a rolling ball of fire. This was not a pleasant experience to see somebody killed like that. We have always expected that the air-to-air combat is machine against machine, and we don't normally get to see the blood and the guts, so this was pretty much of a shock.
Fiedler climbs to altitude and heads back to base. He has scored his 4th and 5th victories. Fiedler is an ace. January 3rd, 1942. It's pilot David Tex Hill's first mission for the Flying Tigers. Tex Hill left the Navy to volunteer. He's eager for action. He and 3 other American pilots aimed their P-40 Tomahawks toward the Japanese airfield at Raheng, Thailand. The plan? Arrive at dawn and devastate enemy aircraft on the ground.
Jack Newkirk, who was the squadron leader, and he had Bert Christman on his wing, and Jim Howard leading the element, and I was on Jim's wing.
Shortly after takeoff, one of the P-40s radios in.
Bert Christman had engine trouble, so he had to turn back.
Crispin heads for home. The 3 remaining P-40s continue on. They're over the target at first light. They make a left turn to align with the field and begin a shallow dive. The pilots line up one behind the other, about 950 feet apart, known as a string formation.
They would bend it over, which means to put your airplane in a dive, and accelerate as they came down to strafe the aircraft on the ground.
Their 1,200 horsepower Allison engines scream as they dive towards the airfield at 300 miles per hour. Jim Howard strafes the area, raking the airfield with machine gun fire. Tex Hill dives after him, preparing his own strafing run. But the run is cut short. Tex sees a Ki-27 Nate at 10 o'clock streaking in right onto Howard's tail. Jim Howard strafes the airfield. And the Nate pumps lead into him. Tex closes on the Nate's tail and lines him up in his crosshairs.
Our ammo is loaded with every fifth round was a tracer. So it looked like just a big hose, you know, going out there. So I just looking right through the windscreen and following those tracers, and it blew up right in front of me.
He blasts through the churning fireball. At the other end of the airfield, Jim Howard pulls up from his strafing run, intact. It's Tex's first victory, but there's no time to celebrate. Another Nate is at 12 o'clock high, directly in front of him.
When I saw that other guy who was starting to make a pass on me, then I turned into him head on.
It's a defining moment for Tex when he would demonstrate perfectly the strengths of the P-40 over the Japanese Nate. The P-40 was built by the Curtiss Aircraft Company in Buffalo, New York. Claire Chennault obtained 100 that were originally destined for the British RAF. The P-40B was rugged, could reach 378 miles per hour, and was heavily armed with two 50 caliber nose-mounted machine guns and 4 wing-mounted 30 calibers. It also had thick armor around the engine and cockpit to protect the pilot. Its opponent is the Nakajima Ki-27 Nate, which entered service in 1936. The Nate had an air-cooled radial engine and fixed landing gear. Its top speed was 305 miles per hour, and it was armed with one 12.7 millimeter and one 7.7 millimeter nose-mounted machine gun. The P-40 had better firepower and armor, but it was heavy and could not turn with the much lighter Japanese Nate. These fundamental differences in aircraft design philosophy were at the core of Claire Chennault's approach to dogfighting.
And the type of attacks he typically set up was to come in at high altitude, make screaming diving attacks against Japanese formations, take the energy that they built up, zoom climb up to a high altitude again, and come back around. He told his pilots, do not dogfight with the Japanese airplanes. It was certain death.
Facing a Japanese Nate head-on, Tex Hill applies these tactics. He knows the way to dogfight with a Nate is not to dogfight at all. Instead, he'll charge him with machine guns blazing. Tex Hill is here. The Nate is here. Tex will pull up into the Nate, aim towards him, and attack him head-on.
I'm pulling into him, and of course I had the firepower on the head-on.
The fighters close at over 600 miles per hour. The Nate peppers Tex's aircraft, but the P-40's armor plate does its job.
Eventually, the lighter armored Nate couldn't take the punishment and ended up spiraling out of control.
The Nate spirals into the jungle. The fight's over.
I had no idea where Howard and Newkirk were. I just headed right home, get out of that area.
Suddenly, Tex feels an intense vibration. His plane is shaking, unlike anything he's ever felt before.
The instruments are probably just almost shaking out of the panel itself, and he's probably wondering if he's even going to make it back to base.
He finally reaches Mingaladon Airfield, where Howard and Newkirk have also landed safely. He looks at his plane.
He shot 33 holes in my airplane. Some of his bullets stuck in my prop, and it threw the prop out of balance. And I thought the engine was coming out of the airplane.
The Flying Tiger's first offensive mission against the Japanese is a success. 4 enemy fighters destroyed in the air, 4 bombers on the ground. Kamikaze. A terrifying weapon conceived in desperation. Japanese pilots committed to an unthinkable mission, a violent end as a human bomb. Now, through startling computer animation, an unprecedented view of these suicide attacks. On deck with horrified American sailors. And inside the Kamikaze's cockpits, as suicide airplanes and rockets hurtle towards oblivion. April 16, 1945, the destroyer USS Laffey, accompanied by support ships LCS-51 and 116, is patrolling waters 50 miles north of Okinawa. The ship is on radar picket duty, a new defensive tactic that positions a ring of destroyers around the main invasion force to create an early warning system against incoming aircraft. Laffey is manning station number 1, the closest to Japan. The last 4 destroyers to patrol this area were slammed by kamikazes. Ari Futridis is a 19-year-old quartermaster on Laffey.
We knew that being the first in the line of defense was dangerous, but we didn't realize to what extent.
At 7:44 a.m., radar picks up a solitary Val dive bomber 6 miles out, approaching off the port bow. Laffey's 5-inch guns quickly open fire. At 3 miles, the Val jettisons its bomb and turns away.
Probably came in just to look over the situation and then took off.
Then, at 8:29 a.m., a swarm of 50 Japanese planes appears on the horizon. The attackers circle ominously, like vultures. The USS Laffey is about to face the most unrelenting kamikaze attack in history. Al Doris watches the terrifying procession from his 40mm gun mount.
Well, they were just about every place you looked. You know, you could see a Japanese plane.
Suddenly, 4 Vals break formation and bear down on Laffey.
They were coming in low on the water, and somebody on our gun said, well, here they come. They're coming now.
2 head for the starboard bow. Captain Julius Beckton orders Laffey to come about, hard left 30 degrees, to bring all his guns broadside to the attackers. Laffey unleashes an anti-aircraft barrage. First, the main battery, 5-inch radar-directed guns.
And then they get in a little closer than the 40s. And they get a little closer, then the 20mm will start rattling at them. We just try to stop them as best we could.
Laffey splashes the first 2 attackers, but the other 2 Vals wheel around to come in from the stern. One Val sheds pieces of fuselage until its fixed landing gear catches the water. Tracers converge on the second Val. Laffey is barely spared a moment's respite before a Judy screams in from 90 degrees to starboard. Judys are a fast dive bomber, top speed 340 miles per hour. But this one's heading in at a poor attack angle. All of Laffey's guns can train their fire on the Kamikaze. But immediately, another Judy barrels in on the opposite side. The destroyer's top speed is 35 knots, and it can turn sharply. Captain Becton orders 30 degrees hard right rudder.
This diving Judy was also strafing with its guns, trying to take out personnel on the command bridge. And so we had briefly a two-way gunnery duel between an oncoming Kamikaze and the defending gunners.
The Judy is no match for Laffey's main battery. The aircraft disintegrates. But its bomb detonates in the water, spewing killing shrapnel over exposed areas of the ship. Planes are coming in from every angle, using specialized tactics developed over months of experience. USS Laffey has taken repeated Kamikaze hits. And at least 30 Japanese planes are still waiting to pounce. Now, not a moment too soon, Marine Corps F-4U Corsairs scream in.
We looked up and saw them. Well, that took a lot off of us because they kept them busy from then on.
The F-4U Corsair was one of the most advanced naval fighters of the Pacific War. Its distinctive bent wing derived from the clearance needed from its huge 13-foot propeller. The shape also reduced aerodynamic drag.
The Corsair had a clear advantage over any Japanese aircraft. High speed, tough, very maneuverable, take a lot of punishment.
Time and again, the Corsair pilots risked their own lives, chasing the Kamikazes down through Laffey's unceasing anti-aircraft fire. One is hot on the tail of a Ki-43 Oscar.
This Japanese plane was coming in and the Corsair come up underneath of him. Tried to raise him up to get him away from the ship.
The Oscar shears off the port yard arm. The Corsair hits the ship's radar antenna and careens away, badly damaged. The courageous American pilot manages to bail out. Suddenly, a bow looms menacingly towards the bridge, Ari Futridi's battle station.
It was very vivid in my mind. There was a huge bomb under his belly. And as he approached, the bomb got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I really felt at that point that that was going to be a statistic.
But at the last second, gun mount 52 traverses from port to starboard.
He hit the plane directly on the nose, and it disintegrated. That I remember very vividly.
Finally, the 22nd and last attacker, a Judy, streaks in. The Corsair blasts the Kamikaze before it could strike the ship. Now, only the roar of the Corsair's 2,000 horsepower engines fill the sky. After 80 minutes of non-stop combat, 6 Kamikaze strikes and 4 bomb hits, incredibly, Laffey is still afloat. crew of 355, 32 men have died and 71 more are wounded. But the destroyer will survive to fight another day. Outnumbered American fighter pilots battle marauding Japanese airmen to control the skies over a sweltering Pacific island called Guadalcanal. During a grueling 6-month slugfest, their combat in the sky will help decide the course of the Pacific War. August 7th, 1942, America launches its first amphibious assault of World War II. Over 11,000 U.S. Marines storm ashore at Guadalcanal. The Marines quickly gain a foothold on the island. By the second day, they take the Japanese airstrip, renaming it Henderson Field. The Japanese bring in thousands of fresh troops to Guadalcanal and attack the Americans relentlessly, trying to drive them off the island. The Marines fight off attacks while desperately trying to prepare Henderson Field for operations. Japanese tractors and equipment are commandeered to improve the small crushed coral runway. Bomb damage is repaired, and PSP, perforated steel planking, is hurriedly laid down. After 2 weeks, they finish the airstrip and fly in 19 F-4F Wildcat fighters and 12 SBD Dauntless dive bombers.
It was only because of the ability of the Americans to place aircraft on Henderson Field to protect the supply ships bringing in reinforcements and supplies to the Marines on Guadalcanal that the island could be held.
Because the Allied code name for Guadalcanal is Cactus, Henderson Field becomes the home of the tiny Cactus Air Force, at first consisting of just 43 pilots and ground crew. The men of Henderson Field soon discover it isn't just the enemy making their lives hell.
The island was a fly-infested, dirty, stinking, blood-soaked, damned island that was just dangerous to even walk on the beaches because there was so much unexploded ammunition around.
The pilots and ground crew live in mud-floored tents. The latrine is a trench with a log seat, and the bathtub is the Lunga River, complete with crocodiles and leeches. The flyers of the Cactus Air Force are outnumbered and short on supplies. Their fighter, the F-4F Wildcat, can't match the agility of the enemy Zero. But a big advantage for the Cactus Air Force is that they are commanded by a born leader in 27-year-old John Smith. Smith's an aggressive dogfighter and skilled tactician.
He always preached and devised his tactics around you have to pit your strengths against the enemy's weakness. And that is as true today as it ever was since the first airplane ever flew in combat.
Now, on August 30th, 1942, Captain John Smith and his men are protecting Guadalcanal from approaching bombers and fighters. In his 8 days on the island, Smith has already scored 5 kills, making him an ace. Today, he's racked up 1 more. Then he spots another Zero below, breaking from a cloud. The Zero is here. Smith is here, high above him. He plans to use the Wildcat's diving speed to try and drop behind the Japanese plane. Smith first rolls inverted, then dives. This creates positive G-force instead of negative Gs.
You roll on your back, pull aft on the stick, and pull positive Gs so you're pushed into your seat. You can be able to pull more Gs, which means you can pull your nose downhill faster.
The maneuver works. Smith rolls back over, then levels out behind the Zero and fires. The Wildcat's 6 50 caliber guns deliver 200 rounds in a 4-second burst. White-hot, phosphorus-filled incendiary bullets ignite the Zero's fuel tank. But as Smith arcs away from his second victim, the predator becomes the prey. A Japanese Zero closes in on Smith from dead ahead. High above the green jungle canopy of Guadalcanal, the planes converge at over 600 miles per hour.
Think of a high-speed game of chicken going directly at your target, and no one wants to flinch, because if you flinch, you become defensive. And you have to be pointing at the target to shoot them, so it has to be head-to-head.
Once in range, the Zero opens up with his 20mm cannon. Smith answers with his .50 caliber machine guns.
It's basically that slugfest all the way to the merge. Who's going to flinch first, or who's going to blow up first?
Both planes are taking hits, but Smith's Wildcat has thicker armor, and he's withstanding the blows.
And then the overwhelming firepower of the Navy airplane cut this guy into ribbons. He exploded. And then what Smith did is dump the nose over very hard, very abruptly, and flew underneath the debris field and escaped.
The Zero has made a fatal error. He fought the Wildcat's fight. Built by Grumman Aircraft, the Wildcat is first flown in 1937. The rugged plane features cockpit armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. These tanks are coated with layers of rubber that expand and reseal if they're punctured. The Wildcat faces the most famous of all Japanese aircraft, the deadly Mitsubishi A6M3 The lightweight Zero can outturn and outclimb the Wildcat, a lethal advantage in a dogfight. But its thin armor protection and lack of self-sealing fuel tanks means it can't survive a slugging match with the tougher Wildcat.
Essentially, in fighter versus fighter combat, the difference between the Wildcat and the Zero is the difference between a battle axe and a rapier. They can both be effective, but they're used somewhat differently.
The Zero is faster, more maneuverable, and can outclimb the Wildcat, while the Grumman is tougher, more heavily armed, and can outdive the Zero.
Wildcat pilots in general would want to avoid returning fight with the Zero. That would not be their fight. The Wildcat with its 650 cal machine guns, heavy body armor, heavy armor around the engine cowling, preferred head-on attacks, frontal attacks, and it would just basically plow through that Zero.
The air battle of August 30th is a resounding victory for Smith and his pilots. They shoot down 14 of the 22 attacking Zeros. The Japanese bombers the Zeros were protecting retreat before reaching Guadalcanal.